A rise in obesity.
Overweight.
Obesity levels are predicted to rise.
Americans are not winning their battle against obesity.
People are putting on weight. What can we do about it?
1 in 8 of the world's population are now classed as obese.
2/3 of American adults are seriously overweight or obese.
Obesity is one of the fastest growing health threats of our time.
Obesity levels are predicted to rise rapidly until the end of the decade.
The alarm on obesity.
Half of all Americans could be obese.
Our society has a big problem, an obesity epidemic problem. And no matter what all these fat acceptance influencers are telling you, this is not healthy. And I don't want to get into details of why I don't really like body positivity, fat movement, if I must say. I like body positivity as an idea of accepting your body how it is and loving yourself. But obesity is a problem and being fat is a problem. Today, I just want to talk about why we're storing fat and how did that happen? Why evolution decide that this is necessary for us? What fat regulates and how losing or gaining fat may affect our health. But first, let's talk of the fitness value of fat. To understand the fitness value of fat, we have to understand two major concepts: fat and being fat. Fattening refers to the process or function that leads to fat accumulation. This is a biological response evolved to secure energy reserve during time of abundance in preparation for potential scarcity. This adaptive mechanism, governed by hormones, metabolic and behavior signals, ensured that early humans could survive periods of famine, migration, or environmental stress. In contrast, being fat represents the state or outcome of this process. From an evolutionary standpoint, fat and being fat, they worked together to enhance the reproduction and survival success. So the human body capacity would be to store the fat and later utilize that fat when food was not available. However, in modern environments characterized by constant food availability and reduced physical demands, this once beneficial adaptation can become maladaptive, contributing to metabolic diseases and obesity. Across all mammals, including apes, fat evolved as primarily a survival mechanism, a way to buffer energy when food was scarce. So if we think about our ancestors and what they could have faced, any seasonal changes, any period of famine, any migration that they did, climate changes, then we can definitely understand how storing fat carried such importance in reassuring our survival. In the tropics, Homo sapiens mastered persistent hunting, a combination of tracking and endurance running. Our ability to sweat and resist overheating gave us a unique edge. We could exhaust prey by outlasting it. Such strategy required low body fat, high stamina, and exceptional thermoregulation. Adiposity functioned not as a constant storage, but as a temporary energy insurance between successful hunts or harvests. The earliest anatomically modern humans evolved in tropical East Africa roughly 200,000 years ago. The equatorial climate imposed selective pressures favoring heat dissipation over heat conservation. Early humans developed longer, slender limbs that increased surface area relative to body volume, narrow torso, and reduced insulation, minimizing internal heat buildup. Highly active sweat glands and efficient vasodilatation mechanism for evaporative cooling. This tropical morphotype, described by Allen's rule and Bergmann's rule, represents a biological strategy of maintaining thermal equilibrium in high ambient temperatures. Around 70,000 years ago, human groups began to leave Africa, dispersing across Eurasia. Each migration introduced new thermal and nutritional challenges. In colder latitude, survival depended on retaining metabolic heat, which is a reversal of the African problem. In these regions, natural selection favored individuals who could store more subcutaneous and visceral fat to insulate vital organs, activate brown adipose tissues for non-shivering thermogenesis, develop shorter, stockier builds with lower surface area to volume ratios, and exhibit broader chests, noses, and trunks, reducing heat loss from respiration and skin. Climate also shaped the sex-specific deposition of fat. In cold environments, women with greater subcutaneous stores gained reproductive advantages to sustain pregnancy and lactation when food was scarce. In warmer climates, selective pressure favored metabolic efficiency and mobility. Over generations, this contributed to pronounced sexual dimorphism in human fat distribution. Women maintaining higher glutofemoral and subcutaneous stores, and men showing more visceral and muscular profiles. This is important, but now we have a bigger player in picture, which is reproduction. Reproduction is one of most energy demanding biological process. So storing body fat was not only necessary to survive a famine or survive in a cold climate, was also necessary for the reproduction to take place in a really favorable conditions that will ensure the offspring survival. In those environments, women that carried more body fat were most likely be able to get pregnant, carry to term, and then nurse the infants, even though the food was not really available. This association between body fat and reproductive success, this shaped the female physiology and body composition across generations. During pregnancy, maternal metabolism shifts from energy balanced state to one that actively promotes fat storage in early gestation, followed by fat mobilization in later stages. The early gestation phase is characterized by rising estrogen and progesterone levels, which promotes lipogenesis, that is storing triglycerides in white adipose tissue. This stored energy prepares for the heavy metabolic demands of the third trimester and lactation. Insulin sensitivity increases initially, which will encourage efficient nutrient storage. Late gestation, mobilization phase. The body becomes insulin resistant by design, freeing fatty acids and glucose for the fetus. Maternal fat is broken down to supply energy to both the mother and developing fetus. This mechanism ensured that even under reduced food availability, fetal nourishment remained prioritized. The ability to store and later mobilize fat is not a side effect of pregnancy, but an evolved mechanism essential for fetal survival. Fat also contribute to neural development. Maternal stores provides long-chain polysaturated fatty acids, especially DHA, which is critical for fetal brain and retinal development. These fatty acids are mobilized from maternal adipose tissue during late pregnancy and lactation. Population consuming higher fat diet historically showed enhanced infant survival and cognitive outcomes, highlighting the neuroevolutionary value of fat. This relationship between maternal fat, milk consumption, and offspring brain growth has been a major driver of human evolutionary success. After birth, the energy demand still remains quite high because of the milk production. Human breast milk is rich in fat, about 50% of total energy, largely derived from mobilized maternal adipose tissue. Mothers typically lose significant body weight the first months of lactation. In traditional and hunter-gatherer societies, the mobilization was essential for sustaining infants through a period of food scarcity. In this context, maternal fat served as an energetic buffer, ensuring both the mother's survival and her ability to nourish offspring, which is a key evolutionary advantage. There is, however, a delicate balance. Too little maternal fat can lead to infertility, preterm birth, or low birth weight. Too much fat can impair glucose tolerance and placental function, increasing the risk of gestational diabetes or complications. This reflects a stabilizing selection process, favoring an intermediate level of fatness that optimizes reproductive success and survival. Well, human evolution was not only driven by the struggle for survival, it was also driven by competition for mates. Sexual selection and mate competition, along with natural selection, sculpted how the human body looked. And body fat became a powerful signal of fitness. While natural selection favored traits for survival, like efficient energy storage and thermoregulation, sexual selection promoted traits that enhanced reproductive success. Over time, these forces intertwined. Traits that supported survival often became markers of health and fertility, making them desirable to potential mate. This feedback loop between survival utility and attractiveness profoundly shaped human psychology, including the role and presentation of adipose tissue. Adipose tissue essentially was favored by natural selection. Energy storage and reproductive support is now refined into something that is a visible clue of fertility and health. In females, moderate subcutaneous fat, particularly around the hips, thighs, and buttocks, signal hormonal balance, ovulatory potential, and energy efficiency. This pattern of fat distribution, quantified by a low waist to hip ratio, consistently correlates with higher estrogen levels, regular ovulation, greater reproductive success, and perceived attractiveness across cultures. Sexual selection transformed fat from a metabolic function into a reproductive signal. Sexual selection operates through two main processes. First is intersexual selection, which is the mate's choice. Individuals that signal fertility, health, and genetic fitness. And intrasexual selection, same-sex individual that will compete for mate through strength, status, or resources. When the mate constantly prefers traits that will improve survival or reproduction, sexual selection would strengthen the natural selection. And all this dynamic will maintain this equilibrium of attractiveness and functionality. So we established that a female should have more subcutaneous fat and more fat around her thighs, legs, buttocks. But when it comes to men, it's a bit more different. Male body composition was shaped by mating competition and energy display. While natural selection favored survival traits across both sexes, sexual selection in males emphasized strength, dominance, and the ability to compete for mates rather than energy conservation. Males and females follow divergent evolutionary strategies due to different reproductive investments. Females invest heavily in pregnancy and child raising, leading to selection for the energy storage and stability, while male invest more in mating effort, favoring traits that improve competition, courtship success, and social dominance. As a result, male physiology evolved for energy expenditure and muscular display, not for the fat accumulation. In men, body composition became an important sexual and social signal. Traits such as muscularity, broad shoulders, and moderate leanness evolved as visible markers of health, hormonal balance, and resource acquisition ability. Studies show that these characteristics correlate with higher testosterone levels, dominance, and reproductive success, making them targets of female preference and male-male competition alike. Male reproductive strategies rely heavily on energy output through hunting, defense, courtship, and competition. Hormones such as testosterone promote muscle growth and fat mobilization, reinforcing the physical traits associated with dominance and mating effort. As human society evolved from being foragers to agricultural civilizations, fitness began to speak a new language, one of power, fertility, and status. Before, it basically had a survival significance. Now we're seeing this as a symbol status, and eventually this will become a symbol of beauty. The biological function and cultural interpretation reveals how deeply social structured they shaped human body perception. In stratified societies, mate selection often followed status, not aesthetics. Individuals of higher rank had more stable food access, healthier offspring, and greater reproductive success. Their bodies, often fuller and softer, communicated stability, wealth, and fertility. Fatness was not selected through social advantage, not necessarily through intrinsic attractiveness. People found desirable what the environment made adaptive: energy reserve, health, and status. Archaeology and art reflect this shifting in meaning. Venus figurine of the Paleolithic emphasized fatness as a symbol of fertility and plenty. Ancient Egypt and Mesopotamia portrayed rulers as robust and well-fed, in contrast to the lean working class. Renaissance Europe idolized roundness in women as the embodiment of prosperity and motherhood. Fatness was not sexualized for its own sake. It was celebrated as a promise of abundance in time when hunger defined life. With industrialization and modern abundance, meaning inverted. When food became cheap and accessible, thinness emerged as the new symbol of privilege, a mark of restraint, self-control, and access to health or leisure. The very trait that once signified power and survival now became stigmatized as excess and indulgence. Attraction, therefore, is not a fixed instinct, it is a reflection of context, continuously reshaped by environment, economy, and social hierarchy. Archaeological evidence suggests that the use of fire became more regular. It wasn't just for warmth and protection, it actually shaped how we eat. Cooking breaks down plant cell walls and denatures proteins, releasing more calories for the same amount of food. Raw food requires extensive mastication. Cooking cut this dramatically, freeing time for the other activities. Heat killed parasites and bacteria, reducing disease burden. The expensive tissue hypothesis suggests cooking provided the caloric surplus that allowed energy-hungry brains to expand. Harvard anthropologist Richard Wrangham argues in Catching Fire in 2009 that cooking made us human, not just by providing calories, but by creating the social structures around shared meals. The first dietary revolution had cascading effects. Extended childhood. With softer foods, weaning could occur earlier, potentially shortening birth intervals. Social bonding. Shared cooked meals around fires strengthened group cohesion. Division of labor. Food preparation became a specialized activity, often gendered. And food storage. Cooking allowed preservation through smoking and drying. Cooking food represents the first step in human journey from eating food in its natural state to a bit more processed over time. Each stage, agriculture, industrialization, globalization, all this accelerated the process even further, which made us a bit more distant from all those dietary conditions that we evolved to handle. The Neolithic Revolution transformed the relationship between humans, food, and fat. Domestication of plants and animals created this energy availability, which was no longer dependent on being that mobile as our ancestors used to be. Sedentary agricultural life altered human psychology. Diets shift towards carbohydrate-rich staples like grains and legumes. Energy became more abundant but less diverse in macronutrients. And physical activity decreased as food production replaced wide-ranging foraging. This predictable caloric surplus reduced natural selection for extreme metabolic efficiency. Fat stores, once cyclical, became chronic, an early prelude to modern patterns of adiposity. The domestication of pigs and poultry, introducing dairy into the diet, made a big impact on how our body will alter lipid mobilization and hormonal regulation just because of how diverse that became. With reliable food access, population began to accumulate more white adipose tissue and reduce the brown adipose activation due to warmer living conditions and less exposure to cold. Morphological adaptation had lasting mechanical and metabolic effects. Long-limbed tropical bodies remained optimal for endurance and thermoregulation, while compact, cold-adapted bodies conserved energy but were less suited to sustain heat exposure. Agriculture sedentarism now introduces a new pressure: resistance to famine, metabolic thrift, and fertility, but now it's all under the high carbohydrate diet. Genes that once guaranteed survival now predisposed to obesity and metabolic diseases in a world that is constant with abundance. composition of the human diet will influence energy balance, body composition, and regulation of the appetite. Yes, the caloric intake will determine how the weight will change over time. The macronutrient proportions like protein, fats, and carbohydrates shapes how energy is consumed, sensed, and stored. Understanding how each macronutrient interacts with metabolic and hormonal system clarifies why certain diets, certain dietary patterns will promote leanness and certain will promote fat accumulation. Protein provides the structural foundation for muscles, organs, enzymes, and hormones, and supports immune and repair functions. It is indispensable during growth and development, influencing both body composition and metabolic programming from fetal to adult life. Protein has a unique high satiety effect. Diets with higher protein to energy ratio suppress hunger more efficiently, as proposed by the protein leverage hypothesis in 2014. The idea that humans eat until protein requirements are met, regardless of calorie intake. Conversely, low protein diets drive stronger hunger and spontaneous overconsumption of energy dense foods. Each gram of protein is approximately 4 calories, but with the thermic effect of 20 to 30%, meaning more energy is expended during digestion compared to fats and carbohydrates, insufficient intake leads to muscle loss, reduced metabolic rates, and impaired tissue repair, while excess intake, especially in infancy, can accelerate early growth and fat deposition as suggested by early protein hypothesis. Fats provide a concentrated energy source, 9 calories per gram, and are essential for cell membrane structure, hormone synthesis, brain development, and the absorption of fat-soluble vitamins A, D, E, and K. Fat-rich foods are energy-dense but weakly satiating, especially when combined with carbohydrates. Fats are metabolically efficient, ready stored as adipose tissue with minimal energy loss. This efficiency contributes to passive overconsumption, a concept established by Blundell and Prentice in 1996, showing that humans often eat more calories when dietary fat proportion is high. Cultural practices such as African fattening rituals reveal how social norms can override natural appetite regulation, associating fatness with fertility and status. The type of fat also matters. Unsaturated fat from fish, nuts, and olive oil supports cardiovascular and metabolic health, whereas trans and saturated fats from processed foods promote adiposity and systematic inflammation. Carbohydrates serve as the primary fuel for the brain and working muscles, 4 calories per gram. They exist in varying complexity, influencing digestion speed and metabolic response. Complex carbohydrates, whole grains, legumes, and vegetables digest slowly, stabilizing blood glucose and promoting satiety, while refined carbohydrates like sugar or white flour digest rapidly, causing sharp glucose spikes and subsequent hunger rebound. Chronic excess intake of refined carbohydrates increases insulin secretion and reduces fat oxidation, facilitating energy storage as body fat. The combination of high fat and high carbohydrates food maximizes reward signaling in the brain, encouraging overeating. According to Stubb and Tolkamp, if I pronounce that correctly, human appetite evolved as preventing starvation and not to guard against the excess. Genetic adaptations that were designed for our body to thrive and ensure reproduction, it's now working against us. The thrifty genotype characterized by sufficient energy storage, reduced metabolic rate during fasting, and strong appetite drive, will predispose people to obesity, type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular diseases when food is constantly available. This mismatch is striking in populations going rapid nutritional transition. The Pima Indians of Arizona, for example, share genetic ancestry with their counterparts in Mexico who maintain traditional lifestyle. While Mexican Primas show low rates of metabolic diseases, Arizona Primas have among the highest rates of type 2 diabetes in the world, a disparity attributed to their thrifty genotypes encountering modern American diets and sedentary lifestyle. Similar to this, the celiac disease represents another evolutionary mismatch. The HLA-DQ2 and HLA-DQ8 alleles that predispose to gluten sensitivity likely conferred advantages against intestinal infection in ancient populations. In contemporary environments with high gluten consumption and reduced pathogen exposures, these same alleles now contribute to autoimmune pathologies. Beyond the genetic inheritance, famine and nutritional stress leave epigenetic marks that can persist across generations. The Dutch hunger winter 1944-1945 provides compelling evidence that individuals exposed to famine during fetal development develop higher rates of obesity, diabetes, and cardiovascular diseases in adulthood, even when born in post-war abundance. This epigenetic programming represents an intergenerational memory of nutritional stress, preparing offspring for anticipated scarcity that may never materialize. Such mechanisms may help explain the rapid rise of metabolic diseases in population transitioning from traditional to modern lifestyle within just 1 or 2 generations. Another interesting hypothesis is the gastrointestinal infections. Bacterial, viral, and parasitic, all of them may have contributed to how the fat is distributed in human body. In regions historically burdened by enteric pathogens like E. coli or malaria, the immune system is persistently active. The gut immune system, which houses around 70% of the body's immune cells, constantly consumes energy and nutrients to maintain barrier integrity and repair mucosal damage. Because fighting infection is metabolically expensive, the body evolved to divert more energy to immune function and repair. Storing fat closer to vital organs, especially the liver, intestines, and muscles, where it can be rapidly mobilized to fuel inflammatory and repair processes. This could explain why people from infection epidemic regions often show a normal BMI, but the visceral fat is quite high. Throughout human evolution, we see a pattern. Once bigger bodies were symbol of health, morality, status, gradually transformed into symbols of gluttony and diseases. So let's see what cultural, economical, and technological impact may have done to how we see human fatness and what it symbolizes throughout generations. In harsh glacial environments, fat represented survivor insurance, energy reserves for pregnancy, lactation, and famine survival. Geographic patterns show greater corpulence in colder regions like Central Europe, compared to Mediterranean finds, suggesting thermoregulatory adaptation. This figurine likely served as fertility talismans or symbols of abundance, celebrating what was essential for community survival. Medical texts describe obesity and its complication. The Eberus Papyrus mentions excessive fat in relation to heart problems. Egyptian art shows a clear class distinction. Labored are depicted lean and muscular, while nobility and pharaohs appear fuller figured, which was an early evidence of the socioeconomic gradient in adiposity. The goddess Hathor was often depicted as full-figured, linking female adiposity to fertility and nurturing. Hippocrates made some of the earliest clinical observations about obesity, recognized links between corpulence, breathlessness, and infertility, advised moderation in diet and regular exercise, principles remarkably modern in spirit. Galen expanded on Hippocratic principle, describing different body types and recommending specific diet and exercises, which was an early form of personalized medicine. Avicenna, in his Canon of Medicine, provided detailed accounts of obesity and its complications like shortness of breath, fatigue, and increased mortality, described diabetes as sweet urine disease and noted its associations with obesity. Recommended treatments that will involve dietary modification, exercises, massages, and some sort of herbal remedies. Moses Maimonides, physician to Saladin, warned against overeating and sedentarism in his regime of health. And he connected obesity to thickening of blood, which was an early understanding of cardiovascular risk, and recommended balanced eating before feeling full. In the European Middle Ages, obesity became increasingly moralized as one of the 7 deadly sins, the gluttony. Yet paradoxically, royalty and nobility continued to display corpulence as evidence of wealth and privilege. Medical texts began distinguishing between natural fatness, constitutional, and acquired fatness, which was lifestyle related. Leonardo da Vinci and other Renaissance artists demonstrated remarkable understanding of human anatomy, including fat distribution patterns. Da Vinci's drawings shows accurate subcutaneous fat layers. Giovanni Battista Morgani, father of pathological anatomy, made crucial observations. In De Sidibus et Causes Morborum, he described fatty degeneration of organs in obese individuals, correlated clinical symptoms with post-mortem findings, establishing obesity as a cause of organic pathology rather than merely a lifestyle choice. Antoine Lavoisier and Pierre-Simon Laplace demonstrated that metabolism represents combustion, which was the laying foundation for the energy balance theory. William Harvey discovered the blood circulation, enabling understanding of how obesity affects cardiovascular functions. Adolphe Quetelet developed the body mass index, originally Quetelet Index, in 1832. He wanted to define the average man through statistical analysis, but ironically his index, intended for population studies, became the primary clinical tool for assessing individual obesity. William Banting, a London undertaker who popularized what might be the first commercial diet. His 1863 pamphlet Letter on Corpulence described successful weight loss through carbohydrate restriction. William Wood published Cursory Remarks on Corpulence in 1810, one of the first medical texts dedicated to obesity. Claude Bernard discovered glycogen and described metabolic homeostasis. In the early 20th century, obesity remains quite rare, affecting mostly the wealthy. The post-war economic boom increased the food availability and reduced physical labor. Angel Keys controversially promoted the low-fat diet hypothesis in the 1950s. The Framingham Heart Study, begun in 1948, established obesity as a major cardiovascular risk factor. The thrifty gene hypothesis by James Neal in 1962 gained traction by explaining obesity as evolutionary mismatch. Fast food proliferation and increased sugar consumption correlated with rising adiposity. In 1994, leptin was discovered, revolutionizing understanding of obesity biology. The World Health Organization declared obesity a global epidemic in 1997. Bariatric surgery evolved from dangerous experiments to common procedure, and the GLP-1 agonist in 2020s offered the new pharmaceutical approaches. Human adipose tissue represents one of evolution's most remarkable creations, a multifunction organ that ensured our survival, reproduction, and cognitive development through millions of years of environmental uncertainty. It served simultaneously as an energy reservoir, a thermal insulator, a reproductive regulator, and an endocrine communicator. Our capacity to store and mobilize fat efficiently enabled our ancestors to endure famine, colonize diverse climates, and develop the large, metabolically expensive brains that define our species. The very adaptation that made us evolutionarily successful now presents profound challenges in modern environments. Our bodies, exquisitely tuned for scarcity, struggle to navigate abundance. Our appetite regulation systems, evolved to prevent starvation, prove inadequate against constant food availability. Our stress response, designed for acute physical threats, falter under chronic physiological pressures. The biological mismatch represents not a flaw in human design, but a testament to its remarkable success. We're not victims of defective biology, but inheritors of adaptation too successful for own good in fundamentally altered environments. Thank you so much for watching. Like, share, and comment, and I will see you guys into the next one.